I'm going to address two issues in my speech. First, on the issue of standardization exam, whether or not this is something unfair or not, and its relationship to the development of the school itself. Second issue is about incentive to improve, incentive to the student to learn more, and incentive to the teacher to improve their teaching quality. But before that, one independent rebuttal on the issue of evaluation, because this is something that new from the government whip, even if it's mentioned before but never being elaborated, but in the government whip. So they talk about evaluation. They say that you can only evaluate your expenditure and your expenses only if you apply this mechanism. Three responses why this is something that's wrong. Number one, this is untrue because the regulation to practically manage the allocation of fund and how you use that fund is already exists in many layers of governance in status quo that is being inflicted in all schools. For example, there is already a regulation that all dana bos need to be used to buy books and building library, not to other expenses. So we think that the clarity about the regulation and how the fund would be going to be used is already there. They will not going to use the funds recklessly. Second, we think that exactly on that side of the house, in the context of underdeveloped school, we think that exactly on that side of the house, they will lose the incentive to evaluate themselves. Why? You can only have incentive to evaluate if you see that you are going to still operate in the future. The problem is that in that side of the house, in the context of underdeveloped school, they already realize that they are not going to win over the systematic barrier anyway, even if they have strong motivation to develop, even if they already dedicated themselves to that education, but they will not going to win over the system, right? So they will not have motivation anymore to evaluate because no future for them. Lastly, we think better evaluation in our side of the house. We talk about evaluation that more holistic. The way government evaluate their budget and expenses in our side of the house becomes like this. So they allocate certain amount of money, most likely similar to almost all school, depending on their necessity, etc. Now they can see which school that use that money for better and leads to better outcome, and which school does not lead to better outcome. They can identify what is the systematic problem with certain region. They can identify any other externalities that influence the performance of the school. On that side of the house, because you only give money or funding to school who gets improved, so you only evaluate and you only identify the problem within this particular school, not holistic evaluation. We think evaluation goes to opposition side of the house. Now the first issue is about the development of schools and its link to the principle of education. So basically the claim in opposition is that we told you the problem that if you go to their mechanism, the underdeveloped schools would be even more underdeveloped and the advanced school would be even more advanced. No, we also told you that the standardization is to begin with unfair because it is constructed upon the average result or the average standardization that's always reflecting and favor the advanced schools to begin with. Now looks what is their response. Their response is by saying no, the standardization is already fair because it's following the curriculum. Two responses. Number one, the reasons why this is unfair is not because they are not following curriculum. The reasons why this is unfair because unequal access to information like the books, less books, worse internet access, or even the teacher somehow did not attend the class at that particular day. That's what happened in underdeveloped school. That's why it is unfair. But secondly, we think exactly curriculum is most likely being abandoned in underdeveloped school due to their inability to implement what you write in curriculum. Exactly because you do not give them equal facility to implement that curriculum. They also need to adjust to the socio-economic condition around that school. Like they need to stop the class earlier because some students need to help their parents in farming, gardening, and etc. So we think that's something that they imagine but fall anyway. Now their response to our worst case scenario that the underdeveloped school would be even more underdeveloped is by saying it's okay if they get close because they have mechanism to transfer the student and also to train the teachers. Now here's the thing, this is unrealistic solution from government side of the house, because if to begin with the government have enough funding to fund your life to transfer this student to the others to other island that's more developed, to the other city, and fund their life, meaning that the government to begin with already have the capacity to distribute this funding better and build more equal facility on education in all areas. So no necessity to transfer the student anyway if the case of the government to begin with has the fund. So we think that is fall on that side of the house. Now the final comparison that you need to care is that in our side of the house, if the advanced school or the more developed school finally receive less money, we think this is something that is okay because they say that more advanced school needs more money. I'm going to show you why this is something that's untrue. We think if in our worst case scenario, if the advanced school eventually receive less money, that is something still okay because as prominent school, they already have enough capital to run by themselves, not depending on the government. What capital they have? Popularity. They can attract the private sector to invest and to donate on that particular school. Example, in IPB, there is already a research on agriculture building by private sector like Sonoto Foundation and etc. This is exactly an example that once an institution goes more developed, it opens the opportunity for the private sector. Now, why this is something good? Because exactly as advanced school, what you need the most is no longer the fund. It is what you need the most is that to ensure that your graduates finally would be accepted in the outside life of the school or the institution, right? We think it can only happen if to begin with you start building cooperation with the private sector by open up your school for their investment and etc. So better comparative in our side of the house. Anyway, second issue is about incentive to improve. Two layers. Number one, the student incentive to learn more. Two responses. Number one, we already told you in Firman's speech and IPA's speech that the incentive is already there. 40 years ago, the reasons why people not prefer to go to school and serious in education because they are not well exposed to the benefit of undergoing education, etc. The problem is that nowadays there is already a very huge exposure to what is the benefit you can achieve if you if you are being serious in education, better life, more sustainable job, and etc. So this is already enough incentive because this is something that they can relate to their life and this is something that they can observe by themselves right now. We think exactly the second response, exactly on their mechanism, they will kill the current incentive that all students in underdeveloped has. Why? Because in your side of the house, the systematic barrier like the lack of facility, internet access, laboratory now becomes more significant in determining the life and the destiny of these children. The hope and optimistic view to the education now would be overshadowed by the systematic barrier that you create because now they see that, oh, I cannot have high hopes because to begin with I start from a lower level in comparison to those who live in cities. So even if I have a huge motivation, the problem is that other people also have a huge motivation and they have better supporting system. Now, in the context of incentive to the teacher to improve their quality in teaching, three responses. Number one, this is probably true, but only if you can prove that all the characteristic of teacher is always caring to the sustainability of the school, which is very assumptive on that side of the house. Secondly, we think that even if this is good, but this is not the best incentive you can give to the teacher. If you have that money, better to give them more salary, meaning more direct incentive to improve their teaching quality because now they have feeling more responsibility because they get more benefit and more salary. Now, the worst case scenario on that side of the house is exactly teacher that previously running or giving service in underdeveloped area now would escape from that underdeveloped schools because now they see that the career in the underdeveloped school is threatening by the system that the government creates. If I fail, meaning that I will not sustain my career and promising life is happen in a city. So all teachers will also compete how to enroll themselves, how to serve in a good schools in a more developed city. So the motion fold. Thank you. 8.30